On February 28, 2026, coordinated United States and Israeli airstrikes hit deep inside Iranian territory, targeting military bases, nuclear facilities, and power infrastructure. The strikes killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Removing the head of the state's political and military command guaranteed an immediate, massive retaliation from the remaining establishment. This map of the Persian Gulf highlights the Strait of Hormuz, a passage that narrows to just 34 kilometers. Iran's retaliation relied entirely on this geography. They deployed sea mines to commercial vessels, completely severing the shipping lane. This data overlay shows the immediate fallout. The global market instantly lost 20% of its seaborne oil and liquefied natural gas. The situation rapidly locked into a dual blockade. The United States Navy mobilized to block access to Iranian ports, while Iran kept thousands of commercial mariners and billions in international shipping trapped in the Gulf. A regional, ideological standoff managed to paralyze a fifth of the world's energy supply. Two nations managed to freeze global trade without deploying a massive ground invasion, a reality built on 50 years of diplomatic silence. Before the hostage crises and the blockades, the United States and Iran operated as strategic allies. Following World War II, America was widely viewed in Tehran as a balancing force against British and Russian colonial interests. That relationship fractured in 1953. Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized the country's oil industry, stripping control from British corporations. In response, the CIA and MI6 orchestrated a coup to remove him from power. The coup consolidated power under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Backed heavily by American weapons and training, the Shah ruled as an absolute monarch, suppressing political opposition while serving as a reliable Cold War partner for Washington. 2 decades of autocratic rule, enforced by secret police and fueled by unevenly distributed oil wealth, provoked massive social unrest. By 1979, millions of citizens poured into the streets, forcing the Shah into exile and establishing an Islamic republic. When the United States admitted the exiled Shah for medical treatment, the simmering anger boiled over. On November 4, 1979, revolutionary students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. They held 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage for 444 days. The crisis humiliated the Carter administration and resulted in the total severing of formal diplomatic ties. The embassy takeover effectively killed traditional statecraft between the two countries. With no ambassadors and no direct lines of communication, Washington and Tehran were forced to interact entirely through pressure campaigns and indirect attacks. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, the United States relied on containment. Washington weaponized its financial system, applying broad economic sanctions designed to freeze Iranian assets, block oil sales, and starve the new regime of capital. This map shows Iran's geographic reality, in circles by American military bases and heavily armed U.S. allies. Lacking a modern air force due to the sanctions, Tehran developed a survival strategy it called the Axis of Resistance. Instead of building a conventional army, Iran poured resources into proxy militias. They provided financing, weapons, and tactical training to Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis evolved from local insurgencies into heavily armed regional forces, allowing Iran to exert influence and strike at U.S. interests across the Middle East. By funding these proxies, Iran found a way to bleed American resources and maintain a constant threat level without ever providing Washington with a clear target for a direct ground invasion. The conflict found a new focal point as Iran rapidly advanced its nuclear enrichment program. In 2015, the two sides briefly managed a diplomatic breakthrough, signing the JCPOA, a deal that capped Iran's nuclear capabilities in exchange for sanctions relief. That de-escalation lasted 3 years. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement and reinstated a maximum pressure campaign. Foreign firms were banned from Iranian markets, and Tehran's oil exports plummeted. Stripped of diplomatic guardrails, the conflict moved entirely into the shadows. The next few years saw a rapid escalation of cyber warfare targeting national grids, the targeted assassination of top nuclear scientists, and increasing covert attacks on commercial oil tankers navigating the Gulf. The shadow war peaked in early 2020 when a U.S. drone strike killed General Qasem Soleimani, the architect of Iran's proxy network. Iran responded with direct ballistic missile strikes on U.S. troops in Iraq. The total collapse of the nuclear agreement and the normalization of targeted assassinations finally eroded whatever boundaries remained. The diplomatic mechanisms to stop a war had been dismantled long before the 2026 airstrikes began. By April 2026, the global fallout forced a temporary pause. Mediators from nations heavily dependent on Gulf oil, including China, pushed both sides toward a ceasefire to reopen the shipping lanes. But the truce only stopped the immediate bombing. The underlying architecture of the conflict, the rigid ideological hostility, the heavily armed proxy networks, and the crippling economic sanctions, remained entirely intact. This conflict established a new template for global warfare. Traditional frontline battles have been replaced by a permanent state of economic attrition, cyber sabotage, and the weaponization of global choke points. The 2026 crisis proved that a localized power struggle in the Persian Gulf no longer stays local. The supply chains for manufacturing, the cost of agricultural fertilizer, and the price of fuel worldwide are now tethered to the daily decisions made in Washington and Tehran. Until the two nations can establish a functional diplomatic channel, the global economy remains perpetually exposed, waiting for the next step up the escalation ladder.